Welcome back to Meet the Leader. We have another episode here, and today I have Dr. Debbie Humphries joining me. How are you doing, Debbie?
I'm doing well.
That's great. So, what after that collaboration formed, kind of what research activities and initiatives did that lead to, and then what are you currently working on today? So, just give me a brief overview of just some of your research history, your studies, and kind of what's really exciting you today.
So that led to multiple studies in Ghana, where we've been looking at hookworm infection in nutrition, food security, and the ways in which when you're working on long-term infection control in the better off countries, a lot of infectious disease control actually came through improved nutrition and hygiene, not actual disease control. That basically what happens as nutritional status improves, people, we can improve resistance and our ability to resist an infection. And so that's part of the thread that we've been doing in Ghana that we continue to work on. And I also, this is a good ASN story. I was going through a poster session at ASN, and I think we were presenting a poster. A colleague came up that I'd never met. I looked at his name and I said, "Oh, you wrote this recent article on such and such, where you found that, grandparents were a key part of child growth." And he was like, "Yeah." A little surprised. I had used his paper as a midterm exam for my students. And so I knew the paper very, very well. We started talking and ended up collaborating over 5 or more years on secondary analysis of some very interesting cohort study data coming out of the Young Lives study of children in poverty.
Kind of tell me, how has the GNC risks evolved since you've been a member, and what are you most excited about pertaining to that risk, or just pertaining to studies that would fall under that topical category moving forward?
So I'm going to come back to say that I'm serving on the GNC Governing Council, or whatever it's called now.
Yep, governing council, leadership team. We got a couple of synonyms, but yeah, you're
right.
a leader of the team, absolutely.
Because of that meeting with Ben Crookston and that partnership, because through that partnership, I met Ari Stein. And Ari Stein, when he became head of the GNC, encouraged me to think about running for secretary. And I felt like I might have something to offer in that context. I will also note that by tradition, secretaries serve longer than any other position. And so it's been very helpful to me in serving on that governing council to get to learn that terms are often very short, and you don't feel like you really know what's going on before you're done with your 2-year term. And so I've been there, I think I'm in my 5th year. And so I'm finally starting to feel like maybe I understand a little bit about what's happening. And the role of the secretary gave me also the ability to, part of what I do is to listen deeply and to help us put into words what we've just said and what we're talking about. And are we talking about this and this at the same time? And do we need to pull them apart? And so it's been interesting to watch the way the global nutrition, certainly the change from the RISs and the councils to the GEMs is an ongoing change that we're watching. I have really appreciated being part of the conversations and listening to the conversations about how we live our values in serving the American Society of Nutrition, in serving the global community of scientists, and the global population. That we do, certainly global nutrition embodies a responsibility to the population at large in our work. And how do we live that value in these leadership positions?
So with that being said, where do you see the future of nutrition headed? And this is kind of a two-part question in particular, and we did touch on this a little bit earlier in the interview, the role between nutrition translation and its application in clinical practice and public health. So where do we see that evolving to in the future?
I have to go back one step.
Sure.
Because
We're
your
jumping
previous,
around.
yeah, because your previous question of the biggest challenges, the other challenge that I would say that the field of nutrition faces is the global food system. And that, to be cynical, we have a global obesity epidemic that is an economic boon to food companies, to the healthcare system, and to researchers. And we're all making money off of that epidemic. To really change that, science has focused on let's help individuals change. But the driver is the food system. And so until we're able to figure out what's the food system we honestly need, what's the food system that would help us get that would facilitate health, then as long as we're clear that no, that's not policy, that's not, whose role is it to get us the food system that would help us be healthy, as opposed to the food system that we currently have that's about making the most money? And what role is nutrition going to play in continuing to help us figure out how to withstand that food system, which some people can to differing effects, to differing levels. And so there's a part of me that wants us to be working on this question of what's the food system that would help us be healthy. How do we see the bigger picture, which is that, there's all of the metaphors. We're pulling the babies out of the water downstream instead of figuring out what's happening upstream.
Fixing or just optimizing the food system as a whole would then take a lot of pressure off of individuals to then have to make the better choices because they would be presented with better options, is essentially right. what we're getting at, right?
Right.
Yep. You've given me a great overview of, your research, where you started, how ASN has connected you with some awesome people that led to wonderful collaborations and kind of, shaped your trajectory within your career. How can ASN as an organization help these future scientists in the field of nutrition? So a prospective member that wants to join ASN that's, maybe just finishing up their postdoctoral or, at an earlier stage of their career, how does ASN, or how do you foresee ASN as an organization playing a role in just helping advance their career?
So I have appreciated one of the pieces that I have been aware of because of serving on the Global Nutrition Council is all of the efforts that go into providing both mentoring, but also training and career development opportunities for young scientists, and the importance that both ASN members and ASN more broadly as an organization put on supporting early career scientists. And so I would say um, just very simple things like take advantage of the opportunities.
And then last thing, we'll touch on the work-life balance just because I really want to hear your experience in that and just your advice to others. You know, what advice do you have for them in establishing a work-life balance, and what's something that have really worked for you and guaranteeing that you can give the necessary attention to, you know, all facets of your life to get that satisfaction, enjoyment, and personal success from each individual facet?
And I would say that I feel incredibly lucky because the opportunities have come when I needed them. And, you know, I got the postdoc in West Virginia that was part-time that let me be at home. And then when we moved to Connecticut and I started teaching at Yale, it was part-time. You know, I was teaching court and then I was also doing some consulting on the side. In 2007, when our kids were 8 and 10, I started working at Yale half-time and we got benefits. And at the same time, my husband got offered a half-time job with benefits. And so there's been just this incredible luck, I would say, in that we have not had to go to work full time. We have had opportunities. Now we haven't been big spenders. We've also been very cautious about money. And, you know, we had a multifamily house that we rented out in Connecticut. And, you know, so we managed economics in a different way to be able to have opportunities that let us work fewer hours. And
That's
I
awesome.
would say
Yeah.
that the world needs more part-time job with benefits. I think that we are more productive when we spend not all of our waking hours working. I think that the ways in which we have time to be creative is a challenge when we're working full time, which I am doing right now. And for the first time in 20 years. And I'm
In a
aware
pandemic too. Yep.
in a pandemic, and I am aware that I don't have the intellectual space for the kinds of reflection and reading that has always been a part of my life. And I'm holding that awareness while also really appreciating the opportunities that I have right now.
So I was curious, what has been the biggest surprise to you, either professionally or personally, that you've seen along the way? Because you've transitioned so many times, you've seen so many different things. And so I was just curious, what has really stood out to you as, wow, I didn't expect that to happen or see that coming?
Well, I was completely blown away to sit down next to Michael Capello and find out that there was someone doing hookworm research. That, you know, I had been at Yale 8 years at that point. And so one of the journal articles, one of the ones that came out of my dissertation was on the use of human feces for fertilizer in Vietnam and hookworm infection. Okay. And so I think the first meeting after this breakfast when I met Mike and I went and met with him, he was like, "Oh, you're that Humphries." And he remembered that, you know, it's like, oh, somebody read it. But I honestly thought that I was not going to have the opportunity to do I mean, my doctoral research was causes of anemia in Vietnam. looking at hookworm infection in women and children, and diet and reproductive history. Malaria wasn't an issue in the area where we were working. And so because of family, I thought I was putting down global nutrition. And to have the possibility to pick up global nutrition 11 years after I graduated really blew me away. And I am so grateful.
I'll go next. Thank you so much for your talk, Dr. Humphries. It was great. I sort of wanted to follow up a little bit on what you shared about your part-time positions. And, I've heard from others who have done this before and kind of going the non-tenure route with those type of part-time positions and then struggling to get back on the tenure track later. So I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about how the tenure process played into your positions, and then also like what you see about the future of remote work and flexible part-time options for women and anybody else looking for that flexibility.
So I have never been on the tenure track. And when I first started working at Yale, one of my colleagues says, why not? Why aren't you, why don't you want to? And it's like, well, because I don't want to give up my academic freedom. And he said, oh, but we have academic freedom. And I said, yeah, but I want the freedom to not do research if I don't have a question that I think is worth addressing. I do not want to be forced to do studies just to make money, I don't want to jump through someone else's hoops. And so I have stayed off of it. And I don't have any interest in going back to it. I have published, and I have, I have made sure that my work gets out there. I will say that I'm living in Albuquerque. When I went to my dean prior to COVID and said, we're moving to New Mexico, I thought that was the end of my relationship at Yale. It hasn't been. Honestly, I've been on a year-to-year contract since 2007. And one year I went at Yale, the contracts end July, June 30th and July 1 is the new calendar year. My ID didn't work. I'd been in the field in Ghana. I came back, my ID didn't work. I called security. They said, oh, well, your contract's up. And I called the faculty affairs coordinator and said, did I miss the letter? Did I miss something? And she said, oh, I'm so sorry, I'll take care of it. So it's been okay for me to not worry. And some of that grows out of my own faith life, is that I just haven't worried. I think that one of the challenges, going back to that civilization and the colonization pieces, there are ways in which full-time work keeps people from asking too many questions. And, there's a lot of work going into how unemployed young adults destabilize countries. And I would say that there's an interesting tension between what serves the system, which is everybody being on a treadmill, and what serves humanity. So I don't see institutions rolling out the red carpet for part-time positions. And I think the more of us that keep pushing for them, that we need it. At a minimum, we need 30-hour work weeks, or we need something that lets us maintain a larger perspective on the world than just needing to keep our head down.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that.
I would like to just comment a bit about the how often you use the word serendipity. And I found myself wanting to remind myself what that word meant again. And so it's kind of just like chance meeting, or just in the process of doing your normal activities, what you are not really intentional about the opportunities that came up, but when they showed up, you were quick to kind of see it as like, yeah, this is an opportunity. So I'm just wondering if you have some tips or a word or two about how we can leverage, openings, opportunities that we chance upon, because it looks like that has been very key in all of the major moments of your journey.
Yes. And I think that what I would say is be willing to follow up. That you have to seize the opportunity of a chance encounter, and you sort of have to be ready. You have to recognize it, which means that you need to be open to something coming in from left field, something unexpected. And there's a way I'm trying to think about. I have a vague memory of a nonfiction book that I was reading that talked about luck, and that luck isn't just luck. It's also the readiness to engage and see opportunities. And so there is an importance to be willing to say, oh, that's curious. Tell me more about what it is you're doing. I hadn't thought about it that way. And maybe it is a little bit related to what I'm doing. So just encouragement to follow up.
Yeah. Thank you. That's helpful.
Yep.
Maybe the next phase building onto that is kind of once that initial luck has played through, I guess I'm curious how you maintain relationships, because I feel like so much of your work has been partnering with communities. And so how do you kind of maintain and sustain those relationships long term?
So the class that I'm teaching at Yale right now is called Practice-Based Community Health Research. And in that course, I invite community organizations to submit proposals for student projects. And I have organizations that have been coming back for 10 years. And so one piece of the relationship is delivering value. And so the willingness to deliver value, to make sure that you are bringing value to a relationship. Is it saying, I'll start the lit review on this project. I will take the initiative on potential funding opportunities. Think about what value you can bring to make sure. And I would also say that there are ways in which, when you're coming from a non-tenure track position, you almost always feel like you have to give 120% more than everyone else. Because there are ways in which you do come in with the deck stacked against you. Does that make sense? And so you have to be absolutely clear of where the value is, what it is that you're bringing. You might be doing grunt work. You might be taking minutes. You might be whatever it is, but you need to be sure you're bringing value.